his poor dad says, well, we can't afford that. The rich dad says, how do we afford that? And that needs to sink in with a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, how do we afford it? Not, I can't afford that.
Welcome to the Chasing Mountains podcast. Today we are talking about Robert Kiyosaki and Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
So I've told Dave we need to compare books and which one's better. I believe mine is better because it's used. And clearly he's never read his.
I have read mine, but I've read mine just once, and it was recently. It's been over the last month, basically. I think you have revisited yours over the years.
What's funny is it's 20 plus years old. Not the book, the original writing. It says celebrating 20 years as the #1 personal finance book of all time. I wish I could say like stuff like that. That is a crazy statement. I'm hoping it's true. I'm assuming
Who knows if it's true. It could be good marketing.
Exactly. Well, one thing too is like, look, I took notes. I don't know if you could see my notes.
That looks like your kids.
Yeah, my children got a hold of this book with a crayon. The reason we're actually talking about this book today is this is something Dave and I talk about a lot, and we challenge each other with it, is like the poverty mindset or having a rich mindset or a wealth mindset. And a lot of people want to like discount that as like, there's no such thing as poverty mindset. Coming from someone who grew up pretty poor and being around that stuff, yes, there is a mindset. And we'll define what some of that mindset is later on in the podcast as we talk about Robert Kiyosaki. But first, we have some important news. All right. We talked about on a previous podcast, every time that someone does something like a business pro thing, we wish we had a button we could hit. And so Dave went on Amazon and bought, this one is a hype button. For those who want to see it, it's
a hype A.
A hype A, yes. And then Dave has a cha-ching money symbol.
Money.
So we want to set up some guidelines and some rules and some penalties for if we use these inappropriately. Okay. If you use the hype button, you have to say business pro.
Is that so?
That's for, yes. If you hit the hype button,
you have to say business.
You have to say business pro. So if someone does something like a business pro move, we must go business pro. And this is all going back to the joke. We did a video that got like 13 or 14 million views, and I called Mr. Beast a business pro. And when I edited the short down, I took an hour-long conversation and put it into a 15-second clip, and people hated that I called him a business pro.
Well, because in the short, very edited, smashed together short for like 15 seconds.
Yes.
And it was ended with you saying he's a business pro.
Yeah. And you're like, maybe he should own Twitter or run Twitter.
Which those two statements were not really based off
20 minutes apart.
Yeah. And based off of like an hour-long conversation. So, so this is us kind of sort of poking fun a little bit at
poking fun completely. But the reality is the kid is a business pro. If you haven't looked into him, he's smart. He'll
listen to our podcast.
Yes, exactly. And what do you think we should do for the money symbol?
That could be, how about that's the wild card?
Ooh.
That's like the variable. Like we can kind of, what, do you have an idea?
No, I have no idea. I like the idea of a wild card.
That could just be like
what an opportunity. There's an opportunity. That's a good idea.
Like money-making idea?
Yes.
All right, fine.
Like if you're if you come up with a multi-billion-dollar deal, well, we're not going to put it on the podcast.
Me? If I'm going to come up with a multi-billion-dollar
we
deal?
probably won't put it on a podcast. If you come up with like the perfect idea to make $1 billion, we're not releasing that. We're just going to go make the $1 billion.
I'll tell you and Bobby, and that's it.
All right. So if you use the hype button without...
What are consequences of...
I'm just saying, if you use the hype button without saying business pro, we owe Bobby $1. Bobby likes that.
Feel free to abuse that all you want.
Bobby's like, sorry guys, you owe me $20.
Bobby's going to be throwing heavy objects at the button, like from the producers.
Can you hit the business opportunity button for me right now?
Yeah.
I like it.
So you just read the book. I've read it a couple times throughout my life. It was interesting to me. We'll talk a little bit about what he talks about in the book, where he's a young kid learning about finances, learning about money, and the difference between the rich dad, poor dad. But I did not know that when he went on Oprah was when the book really blew up. And when he was going on Oprah, all the producers were really kind of demanding, well, who's the rich dad? We want to know who the rich dad is. Because it's not like he had two fathers, like it was a broken marriage. It was his father, who was an educated guy, a PhD, and he unfortunately struggled with finances most of his life. And when he went to his father to ask, how do we make money? He actually recommended talking to one of his friends' dads, who was an entrepreneur and could just make money out of anything. And anyways, they wanted to know who the rich dad was. And he kind of held off on that. He didn't want to expose who that was, but he went on to say that, he basically bought up a good chunk of Hawaii and ended up making hundreds of millions off the sales with Hyatt and a bunch of other things. But very interesting guy, kind of had a tumultuous business life, but has worth a lot of money. Do you have any stats on that?
Yeah, he's worth $100 million, roughly.
Shoot.
That's what's estimated, his net worth. That counts. That counts. Worth $100 million. And I will say that he's definitely highly regarded as, I think, like a thought leader. And when it comes to the wealth mindset, investing advice, how to generate wealth, there's a lot of people in the real estate world that will tell you when you ask them, what's your favorite book? They will tell you Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I think it's because, I felt like this is not so much like a how-to guide, how to make $1 million. It's not here's how you set up your LLC. Here's how you, do your taxes. Here's your get rich quick guide. Most of this book to me was it was a reflection on how we think and why, and how those that generate wealth and those that are successful in life, are wired to think a little bit differently. And it starts early on, in our lives, and people sort of, I think, work their way into either being those that earn income or those that create wealth. There's kind of these two categories, and it's those that create wealth are who he would call Rich Dad. Mm-hmm. And so he, in the book, he sort of sets this premise, just so for those that haven't read it, of growing up, I think I got the impression of sort of this small town, and his buddy Mike has this father who's very, hardworking, and is at that time sort of what I would see as this entrepreneur who is going to be successful. Mm-hmm. And that's Rich Dad. And Rich Dad had like a warehouse. He had like a convenience store or two, a couple other things going for him. He had people that worked for him, and he, was on his way.
Can I back up just a smidge? When he started the book and he was talking about his father, who was educated, went to school, PhD, is now an educated, or I think he was on the board of education in that area. So I think
he worked for a university.
That's right.
I think he was a professor.
That's right. And so he kind of set up the story, and then he talks about the other dad. Barely graduated high school, didn't do well in school, actually had to drop out of school at one point in time to help out at the family store. And he kind of set up the story in the beginning to where you think, oh, the poor dad is going to be the undereducated one, the one who had to drop out of school. And then he talks about, you almost, it's pictured as the educated one is going to be the wealthy one who knows. Mm. And then he kind of flips it a little bit.
Yeah.
And then he kind of introduces the fact that his educated father, and that's not saying education is bad. Education is wonderful, but it goes to show just because you're educated doesn't mean you know what to do with money.
Yeah. So Rich Dad was kind of, we'll say maybe the non-traditional, according to the status quo, non-traditional path he had taken to, become this business owner and create wealth. Robert's biological father, Poor Dad, as you said, had kind of done, as societal standards go, all the things right. He had got his education all the way up through, getting a PhD, made a good living in terms of his earned income, but was still more or less living paycheck to paycheck and was not able to create wealth. In fact, he talked about how his own dad and some of the other dads in the communities, in the community had, nice cars and nice houses, and had sort of this perception of wealth. Where in contrast, Rich Dad, actually, his house needed some repairs. He wasn't, didn't drive a fancy car.
But you see that. I run into people all the time who are like, wow, they look wealthy. They're driving a Porsche. They live in this massive house. And then you find out that they're actually broke, and they're barely making it paycheck to paycheck. And if there ever is a hiccup in their income, they're done. I feel like I did learn that at an early age, especially from my grandpa Gibson. He had a little bit of money. No one ever knew. He drove terrible cars. Bobby can vouch for that. Those cars never basically worked, and didn't live in the nicest homes. And then find out one day he basically bought 1,000 acres And there was an issue with my grandpa and the bank. The bank was charging a higher percentage than he felt like it was a fluctuating one. And he didn't like the fact. They were like, well, either pay the land off or you're just stuck with it. And so basically he went to another bank, got some money, came back and paid off the 1,000 acres that day. And then everybody was like, hold on a second. He's got money. Like what? But he was good with his money. He lived meager and he invested in assets. And that's something this book talks about a lot, is investing in assets versus liabilities. And they go into pretty good detail about what that is. But anyways, backtrack a little bit. Do you know the story about how he started to ask the question of how to make money?
I could talk about it, but I have a feeling you're going to take us there. Go ahead.
Okay. So he went to his dad, his educated dad, PhD, on the board for education at the school. And he said, Dad, the schools don't teach us how to make money. I want to make money. He had kind of that bug at an early age of entrepreneurialism, entrepreneurialism. Anyways. And he said, how do we make money? And he said, why don't the schools teach us about how to make money? And then his dad said, well, we basically are told what we're supposed to educate people on, and we do what the government tells us to do, what we're allowed to educate throughout high school. And it's not really around finances. And he thought that was weird. And he asked, well, how do I make money? And he basically told him, I don't really know.
Which
get a job is what he told him.
We both agree. I think we both agree that that's weird too.
Yeah,
right?
That's awful. Yeah. Why aren't we teaching people how to use money at a young age? Understanding debt, understanding finances. Because honestly, I think our education system is basically just to make people good employees. And that keeps people in debt and keeps them working and keeps them paying taxes. But he asked his dad, well, how do I make money? And he said, basically, talk to your friend Mike's dad. And he goes, well, why? And he goes, he's an entrepreneur and he knows how to make money out of nothing. And he thought that was interesting. And then he went to actually ask Mike if he could ask his dad, can I ask your dad about how to make money? He said, yeah, sure. And the deal that he made with the boys is, fine, I'll teach you how to make money, but I'm going to have you come work at the shop, but I'm not going to pay you, which is an interesting concept. I'm going to teach you how to make money, but I'm not going to pay you. And he was basically saying if we give you a paycheck, you get lazy. And he began to obviously go into, he was teaching them how to, was it Monopoly, I believe, how to play Monopoly, understand assets, and how to look for ways to make money. That was part of the deal, was like, I'll teach you how to make money by how to find ways to make money. I'm not going to pay you for the information while you're working at the supply house, which I think they were picking up cigarettes, cleaning up, sweeping the shop or whatever it would be.
I think they were cleaning dust because it was like an open air shop.
That's right.
So when the cars would drive through, it would just kick up all this dust and it would coat everything. And so they'd have to constantly, like throughout the day.
And they're like 9 years old,
dust. Right? Yeah, something like that. Yeah. Or probably about that.
Why do you think, and I know this, but why do you think that he said, I'm not going to pay you? What lesson is in that?
Well, if I recall, the reason that Robert says in the book is so that they were working for education. They were working to learn, not working to chase a paycheck, because there was a good amount of text in the book that talks about that, and sort of to kick it over to, not kids, working for free, but when you look at adults following their careers, so often we're in it for the money, and that's not wrong. I love being in it for the money, but there are times even in my own career where I find myself wanting to chase the money and not recognizing, like, hey, in this moment right now, I'm learning so much. I'm getting so much knowledge from my position, from my network, from, what I'm doing day to day. And that's hard sometimes to put a price on. And if you pursue, I guess kind of the summary of the lesson that I got from Robert Kiyosaki was, if you pursue knowledge and pursue opportunities to learn through work, the money will come. But if instead you get those flip-flopped and all you're doing is pursuing more cash and a larger paycheck, you're not setting yourself up for in the future to earn even more money, because you're not actually getting any skill out of it. You're not getting any experience out of it. You're not exposing yourself to difficult situations that you have to overcome. You're just pursuing. And so he talks about, like, when you're pursuing just like that little raise every year, or you shift jobs just to get a touch more money. Again, you need to really, really be conscious of like, okay, what am I actually giving up though? What opportunities am I giving up? And he even talks about like taking a job that is, pays less, if it's a really good opportunity to learn something from the ground up. So that was my takeaway. Yeah. That was kind of like, that was something that really stood out to me that I thought was really interesting.
He has a saying.
What did you think?
He had a saying that his rich dad, his friend Mike's dad, said something about the paycheck is just the amount of money to make you forget about your dreams. And
to trap you.
It traps you, because what it does is it makes you check out at the end of the day. When 5 o'clock comes, you're done. You're not worried about money anymore. It's just enough to scoot by most of the time. And unfortunately, especially in our society, we always go past our amount of income. If someone's making $100,000
right
a year,
up to it.
Yeah, they'll be spending $100,000 a year or $120,000, and they're in debt at the end of the year. And a lot of it that the rich dad was teaching them was about assets. And a lot of times, people unfortunately always think that their home is an asset. But he really breaks it down to like having other homes that bring in revenue, that you're not working, you bought the home, and then the renters or the shop that's renting out your place is actually paying the bill plus some. That is actually an asset. But people go buy a car. That's not an asset. But they'll spend $80,000 on a car, $60,000, $20,000, $30,000 on a car when they can't, depending upon how much money you make. And they see it as an asset, but really it's just getting you A to B. And 80% of the time your car is sitting doing nothing.
What typically has been known in personal finance and in like the banking community as an asset, he challenges that as well. And that's your home. The bank will look at that and call that an asset because they can repossess your house. There's collateral.
It's an asset to them because you're paying them back plus some.
Yes, exactly. They're earning money off of that.
It's only an asset to the bank, man. It really is.
But they look at it as, okay, from a risk standpoint, if Dave doesn't pay on his house, we can take the house and sell it and get our money back, pay off the loan at least and not be at a loss. Well, for Dave though, it's really easy to say, oh yeah, my house is an asset. Well, Robert Kiyosaki challenges that. And that's an uphill challenge in today's economy because a lot of people have just gained a lot of wealth in their home. If you own an asset here during the last few years, if you own your house, I should say.
But if you would have followed him anyways and had 10 houses, you would have really been in the plus. But yes, go ahead.
But I'm just saying with your house where you're living is an expense. You're paying out every month. You're paying your mortgage. On top of that, you're going to pay any property taxes. You're going to pay, replacement of things. We've replaced a lot in our house, from the water heater to the furnace.
Do you feel like it's an asset right now?
I feel like I am investing in it in the way you invest, I guess, in an asset. But the point is, our house is not currently making us money month to month. It doesn't earn us anything. There's no cash flow. And so his argument is, if you're going to invest in real estate, invest in what is truly an investment property that will earn you income. Residential real estate, where you have renters, commercial real estate where you've got a business that is, renting your property or leasing your property. That is what he would consider an asset, not just because there's collateral. I thought that was really interesting because, I spent several years working in banking. And so in my mind, your home was an asset. And again, that was proved to be correct, I think, in the last few years of kind of the wild market and economy. But
unfortunately, going into recession, we'll find out how that turns out.
Yeah, agreed. It'll potentially reset. But
I want to recommend to people to go read this book. It's not very long. This is the updated version, like you said, from 2017.
He's even got illustrations, makes it a little easier.
Yeah. For me, I learned a lot. One of the things I really took away from this was pay yourself first. As an entrepreneur, I always think, oh, well, I've got to pay my bills. I owe people money. I've got to pay them. So when he talks about pay yourself first. And I've always kicked back at that and been like, no, you got to pay your bills. And then I'll leave myself wanting at the end. I don't need to pay myself first. But I challenged myself and my wife in the last year to actually pay ourselves first. And we've found that that's been amazing, because when we pay ourselves first, it's amazing how it kicks into overdrive that we have to pay other people as well. So I work harder. As long as my bills are paid.
Yeah. That's his argument too, is that like, if you put yourself in a position where you have to make ends meet, you will find a way to do it.
Yep. And for me, man, that's something I've always struggled with. It's like, how did we make so much money this month and there doesn't seem to be anything left over for me and my family when it's all said and done? And it's like, how did this company pull in $40,000 this month and somehow I'm still owing in money? Well, now we've got to a point where we pay ourselves first. That's the first person we pay. And then magically, somehow we pay everybody else.
I'm trying to find, he's got some good images in here.
Yeah.
Like graphics that show what you're talking about, but I can't find
We should put a link in the bio for everybody on this.
Yeah, we will.
But
can I talk about pay yourself first too?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Part of that, what he's getting at, I realized like it's more than just surface level too. What I didn't fully realize until I was kind of got well into his argument there was that that also takes the form of like investing. Invest in your 401k specifically, and leverage ways of investment that are tax advantaged.
Right.
So when we think of earning income, like from your job, your employer essentially pushes money your way. Well, while it is on the way to your bank account, just sort of visually talking here, Uncle Sam reaches in and pulls out, what's due. And you end up with what's left over in your bank account after you pay taxes and everything. And part of what he's arguing is that, hey, there are other ways, there are other investments that you can make that are beyond and better, arguably, than just your earned income every week or every month.
Earned income is taxed so high.
Yeah. So when he says pay yourself first, he's also alluding to like pay your future self.
Correct.
So, as many people know, sometimes it's easy to forget, but like pay yourself as much as possible into your 401k, into your retirement accounts, because you can pay yourself first and that money can go untaxed into your future investment accounts as opposed to your earned income, your paycheck.
Right. Or even like a certain type of insurance policies that you can pay into and then borrow from.
There's all kinds of your health savings account.
Exactly.
Your, I forget what it's called. The account for your kids' college savings fund.
I know what you're talking about.
I used to talk about it with people in the bank all the time.
But it allows you to invest. And then it's pre-tax. Just coming from a guy who...
I'm going to look it up. It's a child savings account. 501.
Well, he's looking that up. So I have quite a bit of employees, and every 2 weeks, when I get with the accountant and put together their paychecks,
529. Got it. Sorry.
It's amazing how much money I have to take out of people's earned income and just give it to the government. And the government doesn't pay me to do that. I have to pay accountants to do actually the work for me. It cost us a lot of money to get that money from clients because of obviously transaction fees and all that stuff.
And your marketing and just bringing business in. Yeah.
And it's like at the end of the day, the government just gets money sent to them, taken out of people's checks, and they didn't have to do anything. And you can barely write it off. It's very frustrating. So a lot of times I mean, the paycheck is kind of a bad thing because it's taxed so heavily, and then everything you purchase is taxed also. So as much as you can do, invest into your future, invest into other business, ventures. That's what he's talking about paying yourself first, paying off your own personal debts. Because a lot of times, unfortunately, when you're building a company, you build personal debts. And so a lot of times that pay yourself first is paying off all your debts and making certain that you are comfortable at home. And, that was something, honestly, man, I fought against that for years. And what ended up happening would be I would be in debt and basically broke at the end of the year and struggle for the first 3 or 4 months to pay all that stuff off. And then now it's like, no, we're getting paid. I pay myself monthly or so. And then I pay all my debts and stuff like that off that way. So pay yourself.
Yeah.
That's one of the big things I got from this book.
Yeah. And as an extension of that, can we talk a little bit about the use of a third-party entity to also benefit yourself and pay yourself? So like a corporation or an LLC, like we've both talked a lot about this, and it's partly why we recently formed the LLC for this podcast and for Chasing Mountains Media. Do you want to talk a little bit about
a lot of times if I pay myself, okay, I got to pay my taxes on it. The government sees fit to take 25, 30% of people's income, depending upon your bracket, of course. Well, I don't want them to have that money. And they've put it, yes. I don't want them to take our money.
When it's the government, it's more like,
yeah, the government is basically designed to take your money, and everybody in government is always looking for ways to get more money from you. And they're offering services, but unfortunately I have no say in where that money goes. Anyways, I get
no
off
direct
on that.
say.
No direct.
You can vote.
Yes. Oh, come on. Let's not get into that. Like,
but that doesn't
barely.
Yeah.
I can vote for a guy who might be able to influence a few people, and then he might in 20 years nudge something in the wrong direction, or the right direction, I should say. But no, just in general, like what would I do? I don't want just them to, if I make $100,000, I don't want them taking 20, 30, 40% of that. So what the government does, they incentivize us to invest into the economy, to hire people. Number one, because they can tax those people more. So, but they want you to start businesses, invest. They want the economy moving. They want the dollars moving. That's how the government makes money and how people make money. And obviously small businesses are the majority share of like employers. Mm-hmm. So, by having an LLC, go ahead.
Well, just so to comment on that really quick, that I want to talk about like legal loopholes that people will talk about with taxation. And it's important. Like if you study this, if you look into this much further, what you just said is exactly right. The government wants you to take advantage of loopholes. What a lot of people feel are like businesses and corporations cheating the system.
That's not the case.
It suggests that our government and the IRS is complicit in people cheating the system and is unwilling to charge people. Yes, but it also suggests that like CPAs across the country are just, illegally risking their own practice, their own jobs, their own, butts are on the line, to help these rich guys supposedly, out there keep money. This stuff is legal, and the government, in fact, encourages it. If you've ever been somebody who kind of like thinks that, it's unfair that people take advantage of these loopholes again, which is the term you hear all the time. That's the tax code, and it is the tax code designed by the government to help encourage money flowing through the economy.
Right.
So that's it. Go ahead. Continue.
And one of the things that I was going to say, I was going to interrupt you earlier, but your thought was good, so I stopped. What I was going to say is, literally, if your mindset is anybody who's rich is bad, that's bullshit. Get that out of your mind. There's a lot of amazing people who do amazing stuff and are incredibly wealthy. Being wealthy is not a bad thing, and being poor is not a good thing. There are a lot of amazing poor people, but just because, we have this mentality that rob from the rich and give to the poor. Well, I don't buy that. The whole Robin Hood story type thing is fun, but there's so many wonderful rich people, and I'd rather have more rich people than poor people. So get that out of your mind, that these loopholes are bad. The government wants you to do these things. That's why they make these incentives to do it. Mm-hmm. And all you have to do is learn about that. Go out there, read the books, figure out ways to do loopholes. It's not even really loopholes. It's tax code. So they want you to set up these entities in which, okay, let's just say you started an LLC and it made $1 million. Well, if you gave yourself $1 million, you're going to be paying a large portion of that in taxes. Yep. But Dave Rumer could leave that money in that LLC, buy 5 trucks, hire 12 people, start a business to go do pressure washing, let's just say. And you're hiring all these people, buying all these trucks, you're buying gas, you're doing all this stuff. And then you
rent an office somewhere, like a garage.
Exactly. Yeah. Buying a building, whatever it is, you are making money flow. Mm-hmm. You're hiring people. They're buying things with the money that you gave them for an exchange for work. And then at the end of the year, you may pay yourself $100,000. There may still be $400,000 left in that LLC, and you could have invested it. And so in order, you basically built that company to $1 million worth by buying, building, and then you pay yourself a nice wage.
And let's not forget, when I buy all those pressure washers,
it's a write-off.
I'm paying sales tax.
Oh, exactly.
And whoever sells it to me is paying income tax. Mm-hmm. When I buy those trucks, same thing. I'm paying sales tax.
Gas.
When I buy gas to fuel them. When I, buy that building you're talking about, I'm going to be paying property taxes. So there's still taxation happening throughout.
Right. There's actually more taxes they're making off that $1 million by just allowing that to happen. Because instead of
paying all those 12 employees, all the taxes that are
because
flowing
instead
there.
of you being charged 30-40%, it's again and again and again, as long as it's cycling, they're taxing and they're making money off of it. So use those loopholes. They're just tax code. And it's all legal.
The benefit to Dave then is that if all those expenses of my new LLC equal $1 million, then Dave pays no taxes for the year.
Right.
No income taxes. Right. The LLC pays no taxes because
unless you're in Illinois, if you make any sort of money, they'll charge you 3%.
Well, all right, fine. But like I was saying, you can write off almost all of that because instead of that earned income being $1 million, I can show the government, nope, I had all these expenses and all these ways that I reinvested. And that's just like, what we're talking about is not even necessarily like tax write-offs per se or tax loopholes. That's just basically like running a business and taking advantage of the most basic form of, the tax law. But
the loopholes come where you have a corporation like an S Corp or an LLC that own other LLCs. Then it's in a trust fund in which you have, there's many different ways when you look into like loopholes.
Yeah.
But, and I would just say, as far as this book goes, read it. It's got some interesting information. I've known several people who followed his guidelines to the T and they're worth money. And then I know other people who kind of half-assed it and it made them broke around 2008 and 2009. I'll tell you that much.
So question for you.
Yeah.
Do you think that the rich dad and the poor dad and his experience as a kid, this friend Mike and everything, do you think it's all real? Or do you think that perhaps the stories he tells and the very vivid, detailed conversations that take place are meant to be sort of not analogies, but like are
parables
almost. That's a perfect word for it. Yeah. I mean, what do you think?
I think that there was someone he knew in his life that influenced him, and maybe he didn't have close of a relationship, or he did, and he doesn't want to acknowledge who it is.
Well, he says in the book that his buddy Mike, that they're still friends to this day. Yeah. Mike took over Dad's business, Rich Dad's business, and it's super profitable. So he's
probably just find out they were gangsters on the island, and that's who his influence was. Gangsters know how to make money, and they pay no taxes. So.
Yeah, but that's not necessarily legal.
No, don't do that. I don't know, but the contrast between the two, because a lot of times you assume the educated person who went to college and then now is teaching knows all. I'm telling you, man. I know a guy who had an 8th grade education. And he started off as an HVAC guy. Every morning would get up at 5, go do his HVAC. He ended up having a little money after the end of the year, started a construction company, built house after house after house. The guy, I'm going to be honest with you, I won't tell you who it is, dumb as a box of rocks, but did the same thing over and over again. It was working. By, I think it was like 2010, he had like $8 million worth of buildings that he was renting out to people and leasing, making all this money. I barely could read a book, but because he knew what he was doing, A plus B makes, money. And you don't have to be so educated to, if you didn't go to college, if you don't have a PhD, it doesn't mean you're going to be poor your whole life. And I
agree with that 100%.
Even though you got a master's.
I agree with it. Yeah. I mean, I have a degree, a couple of degrees. I have my MBA. There are things that, formal education teaches you fine, but I will tell you that, at 35 years old, I spend a huge amount of time learning things on YouTube.
Yes.
Learning things that matter to me in my life in that moment, as well as broader sort of just building this sort of strategy in my mind of building business, creating wealth, and sort of guiding, myself on my journey through life. And I think that it's important to recognize the value of education, not just in the form of going to a university, but like realizing that learning and education needs to be part of your entire life because you need to be able to adapt. And honestly, if I could be good at one thing in life, it would like, if it could be anything, I would want it to be learning. And I'm trying to continue to be as good as possible at learning because then you don't have to know everything all the time. You can learn it. And if you learn it quickly and you learn it well, then you can do anything in life.
How many times have we got a call from a client back when you worked with me and you're like, hey guys, do we know how to do this? And then I would be like, nope, but we could figure it out. We'd get the deal, get the signed contract, and we would study.
And we'd figure it out.
We would do a wonderful job at it.
Yeah.
People thought we'd done it for years.
Yeah.
We might practice 3 weeks before we do it, but man, we're on the way to the project. But it's that learning, figuring out how. I want people, in order to wrap this up, I think we're going a little long, but mindset, that poverty mindset, that wealth mindset. I think this book really hits on this a lot. That's something I struggled with. I obviously had a very entrepreneurial spirit at a young age, but there'd be times I'd hit these brick walls, and I couldn't get past like my own mindset. And a lot of times when I get stuck in a corner and I find myself struggling with something, you know the old statement, like, what would Jesus do? WWJD.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It was a bumper sticker everywhere in the 90s and 2000s. I always thought, like, what would a rich man do? Mm-hmm. And if I think
we still think that all the time
every day, I'm like, what would a rich man do? Well, he wouldn't spend this much money on this. So, and people make fun of me all the time because I kind of drive crappy cars. And I had an employee who has, first off, a nicer car than I do. And she said to one of her clients, she goes, you want to know how to be rich? And the girl goes, yeah, sure. And she points out to my car. It's just like, drive one of those. And the woman looks out and goes, oh, I could never do that. And she drives off in this nice, like Mercedes. And so I heard their conversation where they were struggling with money. Both of them were. Mm-hmm. And then they use my car as an example of how to be rich is don't spend money on cars, and then say they never could do it, and then made fun of me. And it's like, that's it. That's the poverty mindset. Is like, don't try to look rich. Try to be rich. Try to save that money. And we also talked about what is wealth? What is being rich?
What does rich mean? Yeah, thank you, because I was going to ask it. We were talking about
freedom.
It earlier. Like, what does that mean?
Freedom. It means freedom to me. If you ask me if I'm wealthy, I will say yes. Yes, I'm wealthy because I get to say when I wake up. I get to say when I work.
No.
Well,
your kids determine when you wake up.
That is 1,000% true. And I don't sleep much because of them, but that's a choice. I love them. But also, sometimes I could just say to my wife, let's leave work. I'm tired. You want to go somewhere? Let's go do this. Now, I will say this. I do not work 40 hours a week. I probably work 80 or 90 because I love it. And anymore lately, I've been with the kids mostly. I mean, like, for example, we lost our nanny. She moved away. And I've been watching the kids. I'm loving it. And still making money. And I love it. So it's like, what is wealth? I mean, sometimes I look at my bank account and I'm like, this is nice. And then other days I look at it, I'm like, oh my God, I'm poor. And just coming from someone who, I feel like my life has been an up and down. Bobby, I know you feel that way too. We've both had an up and down. We've been poor. We've had money. We've been broker than poor. And my sister back there. I think rich and being wealthy is just freedom to do what you want. And not be particularly a slave to your job. And unfortunately, that's what it feels like. You're not in control of your life. The majority, the most valuable hours of our day are not given to our family. They're not given to our future. They're given to our boss who pays us enough money to afford a house that we have to continue working for to own the house, but we have to have a job to have the car. And it's like, sometimes I feel like it's freedom. And whatever that means to you. If you want the car, if you want the big house, if you want the multiple houses, it might take $20 million to get there, but you could also make $100,000 in a year and only spend 30 and feel free. So I don't know. I think it really comes down to the person. Obviously, when it comes down to someone like Jeff Bezos, that's wealth, that's rich, but I don't know if he's happy. I think I just want to find joy in life. And I want that freedom to be with my family. Right now, for me, it's building a company up to the point to where we don't even have to show up. And it's a struggle. That's hard to break free from that company to where it can function by itself. But yeah, I don't know. What is wealth to you? What is rich?
I think you hit it on the head in a lot of ways. I would just add that I think being rich is also the ability to create wealth. So like,
it's a mindset.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of folks that we have talked about and will talk about on this podcast that have started over many times, who have built, big successful companies. They have
Robert
generated
went
a lot of
bankrupt
wealth.
twice.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think, again, I go back to maybe rich is really a wealth mindset, but I would say it's having the skills, the knowledge, the confidence, the tenacity to be able to anytime generate wealth and create a life for yourself that you desire. And so, I think that most entrepreneurs, as we've talked about, I mean, there's been ups and downs, and I think the ability to, if it doesn't, like, to look at your situation and say, okay, this didn't work out, but I'm going to go make it work out over here. I'm going to go find success through this avenue. Again, I'm going to adapt. I'm going to learn a new thing, or you already have learned how to do that new thing because you're always consuming new information and gaining knowledge. Because
I'm going to tell you, man, when you've lost and the business is folding and you owe all these people money, it's hard to think, I could do this again.
Sure.
Let's start all over.
Or do I even
what did we learn? Yes. What did we learn?
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, though, I'm so proud of my wife. She's not quite the entrepreneur like I am, where every day I'm just, how do I make money? How do we do this? How do we spend this? Oh, this would be a good, but
you mean she's like a normal
she's a normal
even keel?
Yes, she's so normal. But she has turned into this kind of badass boss. And it took a lot. She had employees that she had to fire. She's had people leave that broke her heart. She's had to have payrolls that are tight. She's had payrolls where she's had to take her own money and pay into it. And I've seen her grow. And I'm sure she wants to smack me across the face when I write, okay, now this is what we went through. Let's feel this. But what did we learn? And she doesn't want to hear that most of the time. But now she's like, well, here's what we learned. We learned this, this, and this, and this. We won't do this again in the future. And now she is inspiring me. And, I like to have thought myself the better business person beforehand, but really she's an amazing operator. She's wonderful at bookkeeping, and she's a good leader. And so I think for me, I'm finding myself being more inspired by her, and she's getting that wealth mindset.
Yeah. And I think between the two of you, like we talked about, this is not a how-to guide.
No.
This is a how to think. Mm-hmm. This is the book you would write.
Yeah.
And I think Irene over here would write the practical step-by-step how-to guide.
It would start off with, my husband is a dumbass, what not to do.
It would say on page 1, ignore everything that you read in my husband's.
Podcast of his, don't do it.
No, but I just mean,
don't read it, watch it.
We've talked about this plenty of times before. You guys are a good match because of that.
Wonderful woman.
Perhaps that's why my wife and I, your sister, are also a good match, because she's sometimes a little bit like you.
Yeah.
And I think I'm sometimes a little bit like your wife in that you're like the how to think guy. You're the big picture. You're looking, 5, 10, 20 years out.
Yeah. So many times she's like, great, Jake, that's a great idea, but I got bills tomorrow.
She's like, but that's great. I'm writing this check right now.
It's going about.
Yeah. We've talked about that many times, but I would just want to point out. But she's taught
me and I've taught her, and same with you and I. Yeah. Which is why I was very excited about going into business with you over this Chasing Mountains Media, because I've talked to you before. Business pro. Business pro.
That's just hype. I'm hyped about it.
Well, then you owe her $1.
Damn it.
Pay up.
Pay up, bro. Do you have $1 on you?
No.
I'll make it pay, Bobby. I swear to God.
I can collect myself.
You know what? I think he only has a 10 right there.
I have a 10 in my Kiyosaki book.
Podcast isn't over yet.
Yeah, that's true. She's going to milk as much money. I just think that, when you talk about the mindset, it's like changing that spiritual, thought, that inner, soul of you, to not think of yourself as a victim. Think of yourself as okay, this is the thing I went through. How can I pivot this to better myself, better my family, and better the future of my children's children, or how to pay a bill? You talk about how many times I don't know about you, but in my life, I'm like, well, it's 3 days till rent. I'm negative $27 in my account. How do I pay this money? And especially in the last recession, 08, 09, man, it was bad. And I had to be creative, but it once again changed my mind on how to look for money. I'm going to give you a quick story real quick. we mentioned this before the podcast. My wife had bought a pretty big salon, but across the street, basically, there was an additional salon that had went out of business, and it was for rent. And inside the building was everything you could think of, all the way from the stations, the chairs, the wash stations, to the hairbrushes and massage tables. It was a ready-made salon. And I looked at that as a threat. I was like, well, babe, you have a salon here. Here's a equal, if not bigger salon right here. Someone could just rent the place. Everything's ready to go. And here we have to pay for all this stuff. It's like, let's buy the place out. Let's go to the landlord and buy all the stuff. And she's like, well, that's too much money. Why would we do that? So I went in and actually offered the guy, I think $6,000 for the stuff. He took it. I loaded up all the stuff. Actually, Bobby and I loaded it up.
I was going to say we loaded it up with my boys.
Yeah, it was, we're talking heavy stuff.
Is it what then you and I eventually sold?
Sold off.
Okay.
And I ended up selling the stuff for almost $9,000. So, what I didn't want to do is sell it to another salon. I parted it off piece by piece from people from all over the state. And that was something, if you talk about a business mindset, it was an inconvenience. But now the place is still empty to this day, 2 years later, almost, or a year later, I don't remember. And basically, not only did I get the objective of having an empty building so that a salon couldn't come in and be her competitor, I was able to sell the stuff for profit. And that's what I'm talking about, looking for ways to make money. I didn't make a lot of money off of it. That basically covered the storage. That covered, transportation, anybody, maybe a little bit of money for loading up.
But you eliminated the threat.
I eliminated the threat and
who knows how much money you were able to keep in the long run.
Right. But look for opportunities, please. Just don't be thinking about, oh, the rich are just getting richer. Well, be one of the rich. Try to be one of the rich. Work your job as hard as you freaking can. Save up as much money as you can so that when you see that opportunity, you can pounce.
Yeah. And if you don't know what that means, if you don't know how to be rich or what would a rich person do, again, this is a great starting point. Right. This book is a good way to sort of reset, what we're taught. One of the things he says right here on the back of his book or on the back of the book, as far as what you're going to get out of it. This reminds us why we can't count on the school system to teach our kids about money and why this critical life skill is more important today than ever before. And it explains what to teach your kids about money so they can be prepared for the challenges and opportunities of today's world and enjoy the rich life they deserve. The book acknowledges, as we have too, we are not taught when we're brought up as kids necessarily how to think like a rich person. Mm-hmm. We're taught instead how to go get a job and earn income and pay taxes to the government. And then
hopefully one day retire.
Yeah.
And then with inflation and stuff, that ain't going to happen, people.
Yeah. So it's really easy to say just think like a rich person. This will help you learn how to do that. It's something that you've never, did when you were a kid.
Well, goes back
by the way.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
We need to teach our kids these things.
Yeah.
I think you do a good job of involving your kids in your business, having them be present.
I make him help close out the drawer every night whenever I'm closing.
Yeah.
And he hates it, but he's 3 and I make him count out the money.
Yeah.
And I want him to get used to it.
Yeah.
I just want to say, it goes back to what you were saying earlier when it came to mindset. Like I said, growing up, that's something I struggled with. And if you want to change your mindset, read books, find those quote unquote loopholes, find ways to better your life. I barely can read. I am extremely dyslexic, but I'm still pumping through about a book a week. And the reason I'm able to do that is I'll start off reading a book and then be like, all right, I'm struggling. I'm into chapter 8 and I'm struggling. I'll go get the audiobook and I'll listen to it when I'm working out, or listening to it when I'm watching my children, or listening to them when I'm editing a video. Man, just find the time, force the time.
What's kind of ironic as far as that goes? You and I both come from a pretty robust music background of creating music, investing in music, performing, touring, all these things. I would venture to guess that, like me, you probably don't listen to music anymore.
I do not.
I find that as much as I love music, I'm not willing to miss out on the opportunity to learn something, so when I'm in the car, when I'm, working around the house, whatever it is, if I have the opportunity to be consuming information as sort of a background noise, I'm listening to podcasts or books on tape.
That's the whole point of this podcast, man, is it's forcing us to learn. I'll tell you what, guys, leave a comment below of your books that are inspiring you. I'd love to read some. And
if you've read this book, feel free to comment as well, some of your takeaways. For me, it was just kind of like, wow, this is like kind of a brand new way of seeing, my own life and my own financial situation, because again, I think in our consumer-based society, so much of our decision is based around how can I earn more money? And he basically teaches you how to not earn more money. In fact, says don't earn more money as far as, the IRS is concerned. Instead, find ways.
That doesn't mean falsify your tax records.
No. It doesn't mean you break the law. It means find ways to invest and generate wealth in tax advantaged strategies, and minimize your actual earned income as much as possible. And to me, it's not necessarily a new thought, but to see it sort of explained in the way that he did, I was just like, man, okay, interesting. I gotta internalize that.
It's a book that made me feel bad about some of my own decisions in life. I'm like, damn it, if I would have known this at 20, I think I'd have been much better off. I had a lot of good mentors growing up, though. That's one of the things I think that helped me a lot. My last takeaway from all this is just the pursuit of learning and trying to change your mindset from I can't, because one of the things he talks about is his poor dad says, well, we can't afford that. The rich dad says, how do we afford that? And that needs to sink in with a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, how do we afford it? Not, I can't afford that. And that shit hit me hard because like so much throughout my life, I can't afford that because I'm XYZ. I'm this or that. And this is coming from a guy who's very entrepreneurial. Like I wake up every morning, I'm like, here's a good business idea. And my wife is like, shut up. We haven't even had coffee yet.
And if you can train your brain to think that way, in the process, you're training your brain to actually become a really great entrepreneur. Because the folks that I know that are great entrepreneurs, that are great business leaders, that are successful people, they tend to be really great problem solvers. They're presented with a situation that either they put themselves in or just they sort of fell into because that's just, how luck would have it. But there are people that are good at sort of looking at a situation and instead of saying those words of, we can't do it for these reasons, instead it's how are we going to get there? How are we going to do it? So that's an awesome takeaway. That's probably a great way to end it.
Last story, and we can edit this out if you want to.
Oh, this will be good. We better keep it in.
I watched, so when Disney Plus came out, I went through and watched a bunch of classics.
Like what?
Like just, Davy Crockett, a bunch of things. But I came across the movie Pollyanna. And I know, Bobby, you and I used to watch this a lot. And Pollyanna, it's just a random Disney movie about a little girl who was a missionary or a preacher's daughter. And both her mom and dad died. And in the movie, she played this game called the Glad Game. Bobby, do you remember that?
Yes.
And it was whenever you were going through bad times in life, you take that moment, even though you want to cry, and even though your heart is broken, you start listing off the things that make you glad and make you happy. And as a kid, man, I feel like I had to do that kind of a lot. And as an adult, I watched the movie and I'm not joking. I cried at Pollyanna. And I was just like, why am I sad about this moment? But I knew that throughout parts of my life, I was like, shit, that, that was some tough times. So, mind you, wonderful family. My family's great, but things that we went through, I remember having to sit down, even as a teenager or a young adult, forcing myself to play the Glad Game. What that ended up doing was forcing my brain to think of the wonderful things I have, not the things I don't have. So a lot of times when I'm going through bad times, it's almost easier because it's like, no, yeah, I may be broke or this person I love may have died, but you know what? I've got my mom, I've got my dad, I've got my friends. Then you start listing. When it comes to a wealth mindset, it's the same thing. Don't be looking at what is so bad. Look at opportunities to change your life. Yes, sometimes it sucks when you can't pay your bills or your business went out a bit, your livelihood, you lost your job, you lost your business, whatever it is. Think about the positive things. Think what you learned. If you can train your mind to react that way instead of negatively, your life will change. And I think that's why emotionally I was moved by that kids show, was because that meant a lot to my life. Even to this day, when things are going rough, I look at what makes me glad. And that's honestly, it's changed my life. A little kid's movie impacted my life that much and made me emotional.
Good. That's so good. I mean, I've seen you in life in many situations, like respond in that way. You know, I've seen you live it. So yeah, I mean, that's probably a great place to wrap it.
Let's do it.
You want to take us out?
We're Chasing Mountains Podcast. We appreciate you. Please subscribe. And if you have a book that you love and that's really changed your life, please put it below.
Thank you, guys.
The thoughts and opinions on this show do not reflect those of our advertisers, employers, or other affiliates. The content should not be considered legal or financial advice. The Chasing Mountains Podcast is a production of Chasing Mountains Media. Copyright 2022.